Good evening, everyone. Before the tales begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what hour it is. The more you engage, the more these chilling stories will return to your feed. Now, let's venture into the dark together. The night I pushed that basement door, I stopped believing my family was standard. I used to think every family had secrets. Small ones like hidden arguments or bad financial issues. But ours wasn't small. Ours was buried, locked behind a steel door under our flooring. And for years, my parents made sure I believed it didn't exist. I grew up in Shasta County, California, about 30 minutes north of Redding. Our house sat by itself on 2 acres of dry pine-covered ground. You could hear coyotes at night and smell the iron in the dirt when it rained. My dad, Mason, ran a small hardware supply shop in town. My mom, Carol, worked part-time at the library. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. The only odd thing was how private they were about everything. Where they went, who they talked to, what they did after dark. My younger brother, Drew, and I used to joke about it when we were kids. Dad would go down to the basement and tell us, "Stay upstairs. There's black mold down here." We believed him. When we got older, though, Drew started asking questions. He'd say things like, "Why does Dad keep that padlock on the basement door?" Or, "Why does Mom always turn on the faucet whenever he's down there?" The older I got, the more I noticed those little habits. The sound of running water to mask another sound. The way they'd talk louder whenever the heater vent kicked on. The faint smell that drifted through the floorboards every night after midnight. Metallic and chemical, like rust soaked in bleach. When I was 19, Drew left home without warning. He told me he was going to work construction in Oregon. He packed a single duffel bag and drove off in Dad's old Ford. The next morning, his phone was disconnected. My parents barely reacted. They said he needed space. They never filed a missing person report. Never mentioned him again. For a while, I convinced myself that was normal. People leave. Families move on. But every time I walked past that basement door, I felt something in my gut. A heavy pressure. Like the air on the other side was different. It wasn't until a few years later after Dad's fall that things started unraveling. He fell off a ladder at work, fractured his pelvis, and couldn't move around easily anymore. After that, he stopped going downstairs completely. But at night, I'd still hear noises, scraping, dragging, sometimes a muffled hum that sounded mechanical. I assumed it was the furnace until I realized the noise came even when the heat was off. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of something hitting the floor. A single heavy thud followed by what sounded like quiet sobbing. I thought maybe Mom had fallen, so I went to check. When I stepped into the hallway, I saw a light bleeding out from under the basement door. A soft yellow glow like someone had a lamp on down there. I froze. Mom was standing in front of the door barefoot. Her nightgown twisted like she'd just run out of bed. She had one hand on the knob whispering something. I called her name, and she nearly jumped out of her skin. She pressed a finger to her lips, eyes wide. Then she said something that chilled me completely. "Go back to bed, Jonah. You don't hear anything. Do you understand?" The way she said it didn't sound like my mom. Her voice was flat and cold, like a warning. I nodded and went back to my room, but I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. She made pancakes, smiled, asked about work, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking, and she kept glancing toward the hallway like she expected someone to come up the stairs. For the next few weeks, the smell got worse, stronger, sharper. Sometimes, I'd walk through the kitchen and feel my throat tighten from it. One night, when Dad thought I was asleep, I heard him and Mom arguing. Their voices were low, but the words carried. "You said it would stop after Drew." Mom whispered. Dad's voice cracked. "I don't have a choice. You think I want this. Then why won't you just tell him?" "Because he's not supposed to know." After that, I started to pay attention to every little sound. Every night around midnight, I'd hear Dad unlock the basement door, go down the stairs, and close it behind him. 2 hours later, the dragging would start again. Sometimes the scraping went on until dawn. Then came the envelope. I came home from work one evening and found it sitting on the kitchen table. Inside was over $5,000 in cash, a set of car keys, and a folded sheet of paper. The paper only had 3 sentences written in Mom's handwriting. Leave tonight. Don't come back for a while. Don't ask why. I went into the living room holding the note and found both of them sitting on the couch like they'd been waiting for me. Mom's eyes were red and swollen. Dad looked sick, pale, and drenched in sweat. "Jonah," he said quietly, "there are things we can't explain. Things you shouldn't have to witness." I asked what that meant, but he just shook his head. "Please, son, just take the money and go." I refused. I told them I wasn't leaving until they told me what was occurring. That's when Dad slammed his fist on the table, so hard I jumped. His face twisted into something I'd never seen before. This raw, desperate anger that didn't look like him. "You don't understand what's in that basement," he said. "You don't want to understand." That night, I stayed awake in my room, staring at the hallway light under the door. Around 1:30, I heard the lock on the basement door click open, then footsteps slow, dragging ones. Not my father's. I got up quietly, opened my door an inch, and looked out. The light in the hall flickered, and for a second, I saw a shadow move past the wall. It was tall, thin, and hunched, the shape of someone I hadn't seen in years, but could never forget. Drew. I swear it was him. Same limp, same build. But the way he moved was off, robotic, like he was being guided. I blinked, and the hallway was empty. I wanted to believe I was dreaming. But when I walked closer to the basement door, I could hear faint breathing from the other side. Not gasping or crying, just steady, slow breaths as if someone was sitting in the dark waiting. I went back to my room, locked the door, and sat there until sunrise. The next day, I couldn't take it anymore. I skipped work, waited until both my parents left the house, and went to the garage to find the spare key Dad kept hidden. It wasn't where it should have been. He must have moved it. But then I noticed something else. A small trail of dried mud, leading from the side door to the basement steps. I followed it, heart pounding, and when I reached the door, I realized the lock wasn't engaged. The smell hit me the second I turned the knob. It was overwhelming, metallic, sweet, and foul all at once, like wet iron mixed with decay. I covered my nose and stepped inside. The basement light was on. A single bulb hanging from the ceiling cast a weak yellow glow across the concrete floor. At first, I didn't see anything unusual. Just boxes, tools, a workbench. But when I walked farther in, I noticed the floor sloped downward slightly toward a tarp covering something large near the center of the room. There was a chair next to it. Someone had been sitting there recently. A half-eaten sandwich on a plate. A cup of coffee, still half full. My throat went dry. When I pulled back the tarp, I saw a wooden box the size of a freezer chest. It was bolted shut. Across the lid were several thick chains padlocked together. But what froze me wasn't the box. It was the noise coming from inside it. A slow rhythmic thumping like a heartbeat. I stumbled back, hitting the wall. And that's when I heard the basement door close behind me. I turned and saw my mother standing at the top of the stairs. Her eyes were red again, tears streaming down her face, but her voice was steady. "Jonah," she said softly, "whatever you think is down there, you're not ready to learn." I shouted up at her, demanding to know where Dad was, what was in the box, where Drew went. She didn't answer. She just whispered something that made my knees go weak. "You were supposed to be next." The light flickered once, then went out completely. When the light went out, I thought I'd gone blind. The basement fell into complete silence. No hum, no breathing, no movement, just darkness so heavy it pressed against my skin. I reached for my phone to use the flashlight, but my hands were shaking too bad to hold it steady. The moment I flicked it on, I realized the thumping inside the box had ceased. "Mom," I called out. No answer. I took a slow step forward. The air felt thicker, like it was hard to breathe. When I reached the base of the stairs, I pointed the light upward. The door at the top was still closed, but Mom was gone. I don't know why I didn't run. Maybe because every part of me wanted to understand what she meant, that I was supposed to be next. I went back to the box. The chains rattled faintly as I crouched beside it, my light trembling across the surface. There were words carved into the wood, not names, just dates. Each one spaced about 2 years apart. The most recent one was fresh. The year matched this one. When I touched the lock, I noticed something else. A small metal plate bolted to the side with a keyhole that didn't match the padlocks. I didn't have a key, but the screws holding it in place were half rusted and loose. I found a screwdriver on the workbench and pried it open. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper stained at the edges. It was a handwritten agreement. This agreement binds Mason Cole and Carol Cole to the containment and care of the designated subject. Effective April 14, 1999. Failure to continue care will result in forfeiture. Successor shall be appointed by blood relation only. There were 2 signatures, my parents'. I read it over and over, trying to make sense of what containment meant when I heard a faint creak behind me, the kind of slow, dragging step that had haunted my nights for years. I spun around. My light landed on the far corner of the basement. Someone was standing there. It was Drew, or at least what was left of him. He was barefoot, his skin pale and scarred in places like he'd been burned or chemically peeled. His wrists were bruised and bandaged. His eyes were wide open but unfocused, like he was seeing through me. And even though I wanted to run to him, to hug him, something about the way he stood perfectly still, except for the slow rise and fall of his chest, made me freeze. Drew. My voice cracked. He tilted his head like he was trying to remember who I was. Then he smiled. That smile was wrong. Too wide, too rehearsed. Mom said you'd come, he whispered. His voice was raspy, dry, and the words dragged out like they hurt to say. She said, "It's your turn now." I took a step back. What did they do to you? He looked at the box. They kept me safe. They said I couldn't leave until you were ready to take over. What are you talking about? But he didn't answer. Instead, he turned his head toward the stairs and said louder now, "He's here." The door creaked open. My dad stood at the top holding a flashlight and a pistol. His voice was calm. Too calm. "Jonah, move away from him." I shouted up. "What the hell is going on?" Dad started down the stairs, each step deliberate. "You were never supposed to see this. You were supposed to leave when we told you." "Leave what? What's in the box?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at Drew, who was still smiling faintly, then said, "He's sick, Jonah. He's not your brother anymore." I shook my head. "You're lying." Dad's hand was trembling around the pistol. "Your mother and we made an agreement. Before you were born, before Drew got worse." I didn't understand. Worse from what? Dad stepped closer, shining the flashlight directly at Drew's face. "From himself. You don't know what he's done. You don't know what we've had to stop." Drew flinched at the light, turning away, and for a split second, I saw metal clamps attached to the back of his neck, connected to a cord that disappeared under the floorboards. I felt sick. "Dad," I said quietly, "what did you do to him?" He sighed almost like he was tired of pretending. "We didn't do anything to him. We did what was necessary. The basement keeps him calm. The agreement keeps his family safe." I stared at him in disbelief. "You're insane." That's when Drew spoke again, his voice trembling. "He's right. It's safer here. You don't know what happens when I'm not down here." He looked me dead in the eye, and for a brief second I saw it. A flicker of something violent behind his expression. His fingers twitched like he was fighting the urge to move. Dad took another step toward me. "Jonah, listen carefully. You can walk out of this house right now and forget everything, or you can take my place." "What does that even mean?" He gestured toward the agreement. "Caretaker, successor. It passes by blood. You're next." "I'm not locking my brother in a box." I snapped. Dad's jaw tightened. "Then he'll come for you." Before I could react, Drew lunged. He moved faster than I thought possible, knocking me backward into the workbench. My flashlight flew out of my hand. I felt something sharp slice my arm as I hit the concrete. He was on top of me, his hands wrapping around my throat. His skin was cold, his grip mechanical. Not strong because of anger, but because of conditioning. "Don't fight," he whispered. "It's what we do." I tried to push him off, gasping for air. Dad was shouting something, but everything blurred. There was a deafening bang, then silence. When my vision cleared, Drew was lying beside me. He wasn't moving. Dad stood above us, gun smoking in his hand, tears running down his face. I told you, he said quietly. You don't understand. He holstered the gun, grabbed me by the arm, and dragged me toward the stairs. You'll help me bury him, and then you'll leave. I don't remember much after that. Flashes of dirt, headlights, the smell of bleach again. When I woke up, I was in my car, parked on a road outside town. My clothes were clean. My phone was gone. There was another envelope on the passenger seat. More cash. Another note. You did your part. Don't come back. I drove until sunrise. I didn't stop for gas. Didn't eat. Didn't cry. It felt like my body was on autopilot. Like I was trying to outrun the sound of that gunshot still echoing in my head. 3 months later, I got a call from the sheriff's office. My parents' house had burned down. Total loss. The fire marshal said it started in the basement. They found 2 bodies inside. My mom and dad. Both burned beyond recognition, but they found something else, too. In the report, it said there was a 3rd body, smaller, undocumented. They never identified it. A week after that, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a small brass key on a chain and a single folded piece of paper. There was only one sentence written in my mother's handwriting. Containment passes by blood. That night, for the first time in months, I smelled bleach again, faint and metallic, coming through the vent in my apartment floor. And somewhere below me, in the crawl space I never even knew existed, something started to drag across the concrete. The moment I opened my father's will, I realized it wasn't written by a rational man. He'd been dead for 3 weeks. Sudden heart failure at his cabin near the Canadian border. And in that time, my 2 sisters and I had barely spoken. The 3 of us never agreed, not even as children. Our family ran on quiet annoyance, the kind you only notice after someone departs. But none of that prepared me for what he left behind. The letter was handwritten on yellowed parchment, sealed with his old wax stamp, the one he used when he was sheriff. There wasn't a lawyer, no witnesses, just his handwriting in thick, deliberate marks. To my children, Michael, Sarah, and Claire, what I've hidden from you can't stay buried after I'm gone. Inside the box, you'll find the truth. Whoever unseals it first inherits everything. But you'll have to live with what comes after. There was a small key taped to the page. I remember reading that last line over and over. Whoever opens it first inherits everything. It didn't sound like my father. It sounded like a menace disguised as kindness. The 3 of us met at the cabin that Friday evening. The place looked smaller than I recalled. Peeling paint, overgrown yard, the same rusted truck still half buried in snow beside the shed. Inside, the air smelled like cedar, whiskey, and dust. The box sat on the dining table. It was beautiful in a disturbing manner. Dark mahogany wood, brass corners, and a small combination lock with a keyhole beneath it. Someone had carved one word into the top. Testament. Sarah was the first to speak. This is absurd. Claire rolled her eyes. Of course it is. It's Dad. I said nothing. I just stared at the box. I hadn't seen my sisters in 2 years. Sarah was still all work. Blazer, heels, every hair in place. Claire looked exhausted, probably back on pills again. The air between us was fragile. Sarah folded her arms. Michael, you were the closest to him. You open it. I shook my head. No way. He wanted one of us to make that decision. Whoever does lives with it. That's when Claire giggled. This dry, humorless noise. We've been living with his choices our whole lives. Nobody stirred. For nearly half an hour, the 3 of us just sat there drinking the whiskey he left out, waiting for someone else to make the first move. Finally, Sarah grabbed the key. Fine, I'll do it. She turned the lock, and the lid clicked open with a slow groan. Inside was a stack of old cassette tapes, a folded envelope, and a small silver handgun. Claire whispered, "What the hell?" Sarah picked up the envelope first. On the front was a date, October 22nd, 2001, and underneath it, just one word, reality. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. The first few were family pictures. Us as kids smiling beside the lake, Dad in his uniform, Mom with her arm around him. But then they shifted. The next few showed police crime scenes, burned fields, overturned vehicles, and a white sheet lying in the grass with a dark stain spreading across it. The last one made my stomach churn. It was Mom, or what was left of her. The photo was labeled Recovered Body Case 1427, but the date didn't make sense. Mom's accident had been in 2002. At least, that's what we were told. Sarah slammed the envelope shut. This is some kind of sick prank. I wanted to agree, but the handwriting on the label, that was Dad's. I'd seen it 1,000 times on case files growing up. Claire picked up one of the cassette tapes. It was labeled Interview Number 1, October 2001. We found an old tape player in the cabinet. The moment we pressed play, the room filled with static. Then Dad's voice came through, shaky, almost whispering. Interview 1. Date October 21st, 2001. Subject confessed at approximately 11:47 p.m. Claims knowledge of the blaze. Said it wasn't an accident. Said the girl knew too much. Then a second voice came on. A woman's voice muffled angry. You think you can cover it up, Mason? You think anyone will believe she fell asleep with a candle burning? Dad's voice. Stop talking, Carol, please. There was a struggle. Then a door slammed. The tape ended. Sarah hissed stop. Who the hell is Carol? I stared at her. Mom's name was Caroline. No one said anything for a long time. The snow outside started to fall harder, thick against the windows. Claire finally said he killed her. Sarah shook her head. No, he wouldn't. He couldn't. But deep down, we all knew how violent he could become. The man had been sheriff for 20 years. Everyone in town feared him, even us. We went through the rest of the tapes. Each one was worse. Some had him interrogating people I didn't recognize. Local names, old coworkers, neighbors. But one voice came up again and again. Mom's. Each recording was more desperate, more frightened. She talked about how the sheriff's covering for his kids, how one of them started the fire. Then the final tape changed everything. It was Dad again, calm and cold. Confession recorded October 23rd, 2001. The subject has been silenced. Her body will be moved tonight. The children will never know. There was the click of a lighter, then the sound of flames. The tape cut out. No one breathed for almost a minute. Sarah whispered, "What the hell did we do?" And that's when Claire stood up and pointed at the handgun. He's still protecting someone. One of us. Sarah's voice cracked. You think I did it? I think he wanted one of us to open the box for a purpose. The cabin was dead silent, except for the wind. I looked back into the box and noticed something none of us had seen before. A false base. I pried it up with my fingers. Underneath was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was fresh. Whichever of you opens this has taken my role. What you inherited isn't cash. It's the truth. Don't let the others lie again. At the bottom of the page was a name. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Sarah's. It was Claire's. She froze, eyes wide, staring at her own name in his handwriting. Then she looked at the handgun. Don't, Sarah said softly. Don't you even think about it. But Claire was already weeping. You don't understand. I thought it was an accident. I didn't mean to. Before either of us could move, she reached for the weapon. I dove across the table as the gun went off. The sound was deafening in that small cabin. When the ringing stopped, Sarah was on the floor, blood spreading across her shirt. Claire dropped the gun screaming. I grabbed her and tried to stop the bleeding, but it was useless. She died before the sirens ever came. And when the deputies finally arrived, the only thing I could say was, it was all in the box. They didn't understand what I meant. Nobody would. But that night, sitting alone in the cabin with police lights flashing through the windows, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The box was closed again, and the key was gone. The deputies left the cabin around 3 a.m. They took Sarah's body, bagged the gun, asked me 100 questions I couldn't answer. I told them the truth, that my sister opened a box, and everything fell apart. They nodded like they'd heard it all before, wrote it down, and said they'd be back in the morning. When the last cruiser pulled away, the silence swallowed everything. The storm outside had turned the world white. Power lines sagged under ice, and the trees groaned when the wind hit them. Inside, only one lamp still worked, its bulb flickering just enough to keep the shadows moving. That's when I noticed it again. The box sat exactly where it had been, centered on the dining table. But the lock was back in place. Key absent. It looked heavier somehow. as if something inside had shifted. I told myself I'd dreamed it. I told myself to grab my coat, drive to town, and never come back. But I couldn't leave it sealed. Dad's last line kept echoing in my head. Whoever opens it first inherits everything. I pulled the table closer to the lamp, wiped the blood off the lid, and pressed my ear against the wood. Nothing. No ticking, no air leak, no sound at all. Then I felt it. A faint vibration under the surface, like something quietly humming inside. I found a screwdriver and jammed it into the latch. The lock snapped. Inside, the tapes and papers were absent. In their place were 3 Polaroids lying side by side. The first one was Sarah lying in the exact position where she'd fallen. Same blood pattern, same lighting, but it had been taken from outside the cabin pane. The second photo was me standing by the table holding the screwdriver. That one had been taken seconds ago. The third one was blank. At least it looked blank at first. Then letters began to appear like ink bleeding through paper. Finished the interview. I dropped the photos and stepped back. The air smelled like burnt film. Then I heard the recorder click on by itself. The old tape player sat on the counter worrying though no tape was inside. Interview number 9. My father's voice said, "Final entry. Subject Michael Cole. Status pending confession." I froze. "Son, if you're hearing this, you've opened the box. You need to remember what you did, what I covered for what you found out about." My throat went dry. I whispered, "What are you talking about?" "October 22nd, 2001, he said. "The night your mother died." I backed up until I hit the wall. I wanted to shut it off, but my body wouldn't move. "You were 9, he continued. "You lit the candle in the barn. She went to look for you. You locked the door by mistake. You cried for me. But I didn't hear it until it was too late. I took the blame. I built the lie, so you could grow up untainted. That's what fathers do." The tape clicked off. For a long time, I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that I would remember something like that. But flashes started breaking through. Smoke, screaming, a brass lighter in my hand. I remembered hiding behind the hay bale while Dad dragged her out. I remembered the way he said, "We'll never talk about this again." The sound of the wind outside ceased, replaced by the slow creak of footsteps on the porch. I turned toward the window. A figure was standing just beyond the glass. Pale, motionless, snow catching in her hair. Mom. Her eyes were black from soot. Her face blistered and ruptured, but she was smiling. Not angry, not vindictive, almost proud, like she'd been waiting. I stumbled backward and fell against the chair. The lamp flickered once and expired, leaving only the glow from the snow outside. The door handle started to turn. "Mom," I whispered. The handle stopped. Then another voice spoke. Not hers, not living. It was Dad again from somewhere in the gloom. "You see now the truth isn't what's inside the container. The box is what's inside you." A sharp pain hit the back of my neck like electricity under my skin. My vision dimmed. The world tilted askew. When I came to, the sun was coming up through the kitchen window. The box was gone. So was the handgun. On the table sat a single cassette, labeled Interview 10 Sheriff's Office Evidence. I don't remember leaving the cabin, but I must have driven back to town. I woke up that afternoon in my apartment, clothes still damp, tape still in my pocket. For hours, I told myself not to hear. But by nightfall, I couldn't resist. When I pressed play, I expected Dad's voice again. Instead, I heard a woman. "Com official. This is Deputy Wells, Reading County. Evidence log entry. Interview number 10. Suspect Michael Cole. Confession recorded at 3:27 a.m. January 14th. My stomach sank. Suspect admitted to shooting his sister Sarah Cole at the family cabin following an argument regarding inheritance. I stopped the tape. "That's not true," I said out loud. But the voice persisted. He then described burning the cabin to destroy evidence, claiming his father told him to. Currently in custody, awaiting transfer to county lockup. I looked around my apartment, my couch, my coffee table, the same cracked photo frame, but everything felt wrong. The curtains moved like there was a draft, though the window was closed. I rewound the tape. On the second play, I heard something I hadn't caught before. Faint breathing under the deputy's voice. My own. And then at the very end, a whisper. "You signed the statement." I dropped the recorder. It hit the floor and split open, tape spilling out. Inside the empty shell was a small brass key, the same kind that locked the box. That night, I tried to call Claire's number just to hear her voicemail again. Instead, a man answered. "Sheriff's office," he said. I hung up. The next morning, I packed my bags and left Reading County. I drove south until the radio lost every station. At a rest stop outside Bakersfield, I stopped for coffee. When I came back to my car, there was an envelope under the wiper. It was the same yellow paper as before, same handwriting. "You can't leave inheritance behind, son." Inside was a new Polaroid. Me asleep in my apartment, taken from the foot of my bed. I don't know who took it. Maybe Dad, maybe me. Maybe there was never any difference. I threw the photo into the refuse, but the smell of burned cedar followed me all the way down the motorway. That was 3 months ago. I've moved twice since then. New state, new job, new name. But last night, outside my window, I heard a familiar click, the soft creak of a lock turning open. And this morning, sitting on my kitchen table, was a box I'd never seen before. Same mahogany wood, same brass corners, and across the lid, carved in deep, deliberate strokes, just one word, air. The moment I knew something was amiss with my past was the day the bank refused my credentials. It was a Tuesday in March. I just turned 30 and was refinancing my house in Spokane. The clerk ran my driver's permit, frowned, then typed something again. She looked up and said, "Your social's not matching the birth record. Are you sure this is yours?" I laughed, thinking it was a system flaw. I'd had that same number my entire existence. But when she printed the rejection slip, my name, Lily Hartman, was paired with a birth date 5 years later than mine. I left the bank shaking, thinking maybe the DMV had messed something up. I didn't know then that a simple error was about to tear apart everything I accepted about who I was. That night, I pulled out my birth certificate from the metal box my mom kept under her bed. I'd seen it before when I got my first passport. It looked normal, my full name, birth date, hospital, Sacred Pines Medical Center, Portland, Oregon. But as I held it up to the light, I noticed something unusual. The paper was slightly thicker than it should have been, like 2 sheets glued together. I pried at the corner with my nail. The top layer rose. Underneath was another certificate, same name, but the date was 5 years earlier. And the parents listed weren't mine. Instead of Karen and Robert Hartman, it said Elena and Daniel Reyes. For a second, my brain refused to process it. I thought maybe I'd accidentally pulled 2 papers together. But when I looked closer, the font was older, the hospital stamp different, faded. My mom's handwriting was faintly visible on the reverse. Just 3 words written in pencil. "Don't let her recall." My hands went cold. I sat there on the floor for almost an hour, staring at those 2 pieces of paper like they might explain themselves. Finally, I put the fake one back, slid the drawer shut, and tried to pretend I hadn't seen it. But pretending didn't last. The next morning, I called the Oregon Department of Vital Records, gave them both certificate numbers, and asked if they could verify which was genuine. The woman on the line went quiet for a moment, then said, "Can I put you on hold?" 2 minutes later, a man came on instead. His tone had changed. "Ma'am, could you please tell me where you got these papers?" I told him. "My mother's lockbox." He hesitated, then said, "There's a record for the earlier certificate." "Yes, infant female born 1989 to Elena and Daniel Reyes, but that child was reported deceased in a hospital fire 4 days after birth." I felt like the room tilted sideways. He kept talking, but I didn't hear most of it. Something about records destroyed in the fire, death certificate pending. I hung up without saying farewell. The next call I made was to my mom. She sounded normal, cheerful even. "Hey, sweetie, what's up?" I asked her about the second certificate. There was a long pause, then a shaky giggle. "Oh, that old thing. I must have mixed it up with paperwork from the adoption agency." "What adoption agency?" Another pause. Then she said quietly, "Lily, I think we should talk in person." I drove to her house that night. The drive felt interminable. Every childhood memory ran through my head. The birthdays, the vacations, her teaching me how to ride a bike, all suddenly frail, like they might dissolve if I looked too closely. When I got there, she was already waiting at the table with a cup of tea and that same metal box sitting beside her. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "I didn't steal you," she said before I could even sit down. "You have to understand that." My throat tightened. Then what occurred? She looked at the table, unable to meet my eyes. "There was a fire at the hospital where you were born. It was chaos. Babies were moved to temporary wards. When they started evacuating, someone handed me a child, you, and told me to get out. I thought they knew who you were. When I went back later, the record were gone. Everyone assumed my baby had died. I didn't correct them." She finally looked up, eyes moist. "By the time I realized the reality, it was too late. They buried the wrong infant. I didn't say anything. My body felt empty. So I raised you," she whispered. "I gave you a new name, a better existence. You were happy." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think it was an accident, but something didn't match. Why hide the old certificate? Why write "don't let her recall"? She hesitated. "Because you used to talk about it, about the fire? About someone holding you down?" That line hit me like a blow. I was a newborn. She nodded. "You shouldn't have been able to remember, but you did. You used to wake up screaming, saying, 'She's still in there.'" I felt my chest constrict. "Who?" Her eyes filled again. "Your twin." The room went completely silent. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Not until years later, when I saw the list of victims. There were 2 girls. One body was recovered. The other wasn't. I couldn't breathe. I stood up pacing. "You're telling me I had a sister, and you never told me. I was trying to protect you?" She shouted the first time her voice ever broke in front of me. "From what that family did." "What family?" She didn't answer. Instead, she opened the bottom of the metal box and took out a photograph. It was water damaged and singed at the edges. 2 babies swaddled in identical blankets. A nurse behind them smiling. Someone had written the date on the reverse. February 1989, that I turned it over again and noticed a faint outline in the corner, like something had been torn off. "What was here?" I asked. Her eyes darted away. "That's not essential." I leaned forward. "Mom, what was here?" She finally looked at me and said, "A hospital tag with the other girl's name." I ripped it off, "So you'd stop asking about her." That was the moment something broke between us. I didn't shout. I just walked out. When I got home that night, I couldn't stop staring at the 2 birth certificates on my kitchen table. One said Lily Hartman, the other said Isabel Reyes. I went online and searched for Reyes Family Hospital Fire, 1989. There it was, a local article from an archived newspaper. Mother and infant perish in Sacred Pines fire. Father in critical condition. 1 newborn remains unaccounted for. The father's name was Daniel Reyes. And at the bottom of the article, a single line mentioned where he'd been transferred after the fire to Mill Creek Rehabilitation Center, the same facility that 30 years later was still listed as active in my county. It was 20 minutes from my house. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo. 2 identical babies, 1 missing name tag, 1 erased existence. By dawn, I'd already made up my mind. I was going to Mill Creek. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't want her to talk me out of it. Mill Creek Rehabilitation Center sat on the outskirts of Spokane behind a chain-link fence and a row of dead pines. The sign out front was cracked. Most of the letters had faded, leaving just Illele. The place looked like it had been forgotten decades ago. Inside, the air smelled like bleach and old dust. The receptionist, an older woman with a limp, looked surprised when I asked for Daniel Reyes. She typed his name, frowned, then said quietly, "Your relatives?" "I think so." She studied me for a long second before nodding toward the back hallway. "Room 12A. He doesn't get visitors anymore." The hallway was narrow, lined with flickering fluorescent lights. I could hear the slow beep of machines behind every door. When I reached 12A, the door was already open. He was sitting in a chair by the window, thin and pale, hair gone white. His hands trembled against the blanket on his lap. When he turned, I saw the scars across his jaw, the kind left by burns long healed. "Mr. Reyes?" He blinked a few times, squinting at me. Then softly, Isabel. My stomach clenched. I wanted to correct him to say Lily, but the word caught in my throat. I just nodded. He smiled feebly. I knew you'd come back. They said you died, but I never believed them. I pulled a chair closer. Mr. Reyes, I need to know what happened. The fire, the hospital, everything. He stared out the window for a long time before replying. It wasn't an accident. What do you mean? He took a shaky breath. Sacred Pines wasn't just a maternity ward. The hospital had a research section. Private funding, private patients. Your mother and I signed up for a fertility trial. They said it would guarantee a healthy birth. We didn't know they were experimenting with gene therapy, unapproved methods. My chest constricted. You mean they altered the embryos? He nodded slowly. You were both perfect. 2 girls, but one of the nurses leaked information about the trial to a reporter. The hospital decided to erase everything before it got public. They started a fire to destroy the documentation. Only 1 infant was recovered. I thought it was you, but I saw the other nurse, Karen Hartman, running out with a second baby in her arms. He turned back to me. His eyes were wet now. I begged them to tell me what happened to you. They said there was nothing left to locate. I couldn't speak. The ground under my life shifted again, just like it had when I found that second certificate. She took you, he whispered. She saved you, but she also kept you from me. I stared at the floor dizzy. She said the hospital gave me to her. He shook his head. No hospital would give away a child that precious. That word precious hit me wrong. What are you talking about? He hesitated, then reached into the drawer beside his bed. He pulled out a thin folder and handed it to me. Inside were old medical forms, stamped Confidential Research Cohort B. My name was handwritten across the top. Under genetic notes, there were entries like neurological response exceptional and subject be viable for duplication. I stared at him appalled. What is this? His voice cracked. You weren't supposed to be born twice. I flipped through the papers, my pulse pounding. The last page was a consent form signed Elena Reyes. Beside it was a witness signature, Karen Hartman, my mother's handwriting. I looked up at him. She worked there. He nodded. Head nurse of the maternity wing. The air felt thin. My mother hadn't found me by chance. She'd helped create me. Daniel leaned forward, gripping my wrist with surprising force. Listen to me. There was another child, your twin. But she wasn't just your sister. She was the original. You were the copy they made from her embryo. I pulled my hand free, shaking my head. That's impossible. They said the process failed. He whispered. But I saw both of you identical. One lived, one scorched. That's why Karen took you to hide what they did. I stood up, backing toward the door. You're mistaken. You've been unwell. He didn't dispute. He just said, there's one more folder in the storage room down the hall. Drawer C17. It has everything. I left without answering. The hallway seemed longer now. My footsteps echoed. I found the storage room easily. A narrow file space lit by a single buzzing bulb. The drawer he mentioned was near the back. When I pulled it open, dust spilled out. Inside were stacks of manila folders. The top one had a strip of masking tape labeled Reyes, Twin Program. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside were Polaroids, dozens of them. Some showed medical tables, infant incubators, tubes, and then there was one photo that stopped my breath. 2 toddlers in matching dresses, sitting on a swing set. One of them was me. The other had a small birthmark on her neck, one I'd never possessed. The photo was stamped 1993, Mill Creek Play Study. I flipped it over. Written in marker were the words, Observation complete. Transfer to Household B approved. Household B. I remembered the line from Daniel's file. Subject be viable for duplication. That's what I was. Subject B. I shoved the folder into my bag and fled. The receptionist called after me, but I didn't stop until I was in my car. When I got home, I found the lights on and my mother waiting in the kitchen. She looked like she hadn't rested. The old photograph, the one of the 2 babies, was on the table. You went there, she said. I didn't answer. I tossed the folder onto the table. You lied to me my entire life. She didn't deny it. She just looked weary. They would have taken you back. Do you understand? You were never supposed to leave that lab. Daniel thought he lost a daughter, but what they really lost was their experiment. I felt sick. What about the other girl? My sister, she whispered. She didn't die in that fire. I saw her afterward. They kept her to continue the investigation. I slammed my hand on the table. Where is she? She's gone, my mother said. I don't know where they moved her, but she's out there somewhere. And if she ever finds you. A knock interrupted her. 3 slow, heavy taps. We both froze. It was past midnight. My mother's face went pale. Don't answer it, she whispered. The knocking came again, harder this time. I walked to the door, heart pounding. Who is it? No answer. I looked through the peephole. The porch light flickered once, then stabilized. A woman stood outside, same height as me, same hair, same face. She was wearing a hospital band. When she lifted her hand to knock again, I saw it, the small birthmark on her throat. I stumbled back, whispering, "Oh my God!" My mother's voice was shaking behind me. Lily, listen to me. If you open that door, you'll never be the same person again. But I was already reaching for the lever. The last thing I remember before the lights went out was seeing her smile through the glass. My smile, only older, colder. Then everything went dark. We moved into the dwelling because it was silent. That was the purpose. After 2 years of fertility procedures, a failed gestation, and 1 miscarriage we didn't talk about, calmness felt like remedy. The realtor called it a heritage craftsman. It sat at the end of a tree-lined road outside Boise, the kind of place where the street lights stopped before your mailbox. It had wraparound windows, music, a deep porch, and a single brass plaque by the front entry. Built 1918, Dr. Marion Keene, midwife. The words didn't bother me then. If anything, they felt gentle, historic. I was 3 months pregnant when we signed. The first night was nothing, just boxes. The hum of the refrigerator, my husband Mark, snoring by 1 a.m. I woke around 3 to pee, came back down the hall, and noticed the nursery door still empty, then had swung halfway open. I shut it, blamed uneven floors, and went back to sleep. The next night, it was open again. By week 3, the pattern was established. I closed that door before bed, and every morning it was cracked open an inch like someone had looked in and quietly changed their mind. Mark joked that it was the baby checking in early. He never saw it happen, and I never caught it moving. Around the same time, the air vent by that room started giving off a faint scent like lavender and rubbing alcohol. I told myself it was an old house smell, dust, maybe residue from cleaning agents. Then came the device. We bought one of those simple audio models. No video, just a bass receiver. I set it up early because I liked hearing the gentle hiss. It was oddly comforting, like the sound of the ocean. The first strange sound came on a Thursday. I was folding laundry when I heard faint breathing through the monitor. Steady, rhythmic, deeper than my own. I thought it was feedback from Mark's phone. When I unplugged the bass, the sound stopped mid-inhale. Later that night, lying in bed, it started again. Slow breathing, matching mine exactly until I shifted. Then it adjusted as if hearing. Mark couldn't hear it. He sleeps like the dead. I tried switching the unit off, changing outlets, even moving it to a different chamber. Still the same. Once the house went silent, that gentle breath filled the speaker. I told myself it was electrical interference, maybe from a neighbor's baby monitor. Rational, explainable, except we don't have neighbors that close. The nearest house is a quarter-mile away. By the 6th month, pregnancy tiredness had taken over everything. My back hurt constantly, and the nursery was half complete, crib built, walls painted pale yellow. I kept the door open now because closing it felt futile. Sometimes during the day, I'd hear faint music coming from inside. Not melodies precisely, just a hum, like someone recalling a lullaby, but not the air. When I'd walk in, it would fade. One afternoon, while Mark was at work, I found something wedged behind the closet skirting, a small notebook wrapped in gauze. The pages were brittle, written in fountain ink. The first line read, Delivery Ledger, Dr. Marion Keene, 1919 to 1928. The entries were simple dates, names, weights, but every few pages the word stillborn appeared, underlined twice. Some had short notes beside them. Mother survived, father declined burial, infant kept for research. I closed the book and sat there for a long time. That night, I told Mark. He frowned, said, "You shouldn't be reading that stuff right now." He took the notebook, promised to store it in the garage. I didn't see it again. 2 nights later, the breathing returned louder now, shallow and frantic. When I pressed my ear to the monitor, I heard a soft thump, like a hand against fabric. Then a woman's voice, not words, just a tone, low and shushing. I froze. It lasted maybe 5 seconds, then static. The next morning, I found Mark sitting at the kitchen table, pale, the notebook open in front of him. He said nothing at first, then pointed to an entry dated March 1921. Next to the word stillborn was written, "Baby Hartman, female, mother survived, remains unclaimed." Hartman is Mark's last name. We stared at each other until the coffee went cold. He tried to laugh it off. Common name, right? But I could see he didn't believe it either. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked the hallway slow and cautious, one hand on my stomach. The house creaked like it was breathing with me. When I passed the nursery, the monitor light flicked on by itself. Through the speaker, a heartbeat. Not the baby's, not mine. Slower, older, I whispered, "Hello." The heartbeat stopped. Then the door eased open, the rest of the way silently, as if pushed from inside. The next morning, I booked an appointment with my obstetrician. I didn't tell her about the monitor or the voice, just said I'd been hearing my heartbeat echoing through my ears at night. She smiled kindly and called it pregnancy tinnitus, the body amplifying its own pulse through fluid and bone. She said it was normal, especially for women who'd had miscarriages. The brain gets hyper-attuned to rhythm because it's always listening for a baby that isn't there yet. That explanation worked for about a day. When I got home, the air in the nursery felt dense, like humidity that wouldn't shift. The crib still smelled faintly of paint. I sat in the rocking chair and tried to do my breathing exercises. 4 in, 6 out, but my chest kept sinking to something slower. It felt like someone else setting the pace. That evening, Mark came home early. He said he'd called his mom in Oregon, asked if their family ever lived near Boise. She told him no, but she hesitated before hanging up. An hour later, she called back crying. Her grandmother's sister, Ellen Hartman, had worked as a midwife's assistant in the 1920s. She'd lost a baby in 1921, girl stillborn. That night, Mark packed the notebook in a grocery bag and said he was taking it to the dump. I didn't object. I wanted it gone. For the first time since we moved in, we slept with the nursery door shut tight and a chair braced against it. At 2:47 a.m., the monitor clicked on by itself. The static was faint, almost civil. Then a whisper of fabric. The chair against the door gave a slow groan, just enough for me to know the latch had yielded. Mark stirred. "You hear that?" I nodded. We lay there attentive. After a minute, the sound altered. It wasn't breathing anymore. It was hiccups, tiny uneven gasps, like an infant's first failed attempts. I shut the monitor off, unplugged it, pulled the batteries. The noise kept going. I opened the window. It stopped. The cold air that came in was sharp and sterile, the same antiseptic scent from the vent weeks ago. Neither of us slept. By sunrise, Mark looked gray. He said he felt a tightness in his chest, like someone pressing from inside out. I told him it was probably strain. At breakfast, I noticed a dark smudge on his shirt just above his heart. A perfect thumbprint. He said he must have brushed against the door frame painting last night, but the paint in that room had dried months ago. I checked the nursery. The chair was still wedged under the knob, but the door stood ajar. The wall above the crib had one long vertical crack running down through the yellow paint, as if the house itself had sighed. That afternoon, I called a contractor to check the foundation. He told me the place had a sealed crawl space below the nursery, part of the old birthing section. The hatch was nailed shut years ago. He offered to pry it open, but I said no. That night, I dreamed of breathing underwater. Slow, measured, shared. When I woke, the monitor was missing. Mark said he'd thrown it out on his way to work. Still, every time I lay down, I could feel that second rhythm under mine, patient and deliberate, like someone keeping time for both of us. 2 weeks later, during a prenatal scan, The technician frowned and adjusted the probe. "You said you're 30 weeks," she asked. 31. She stared at the screen for a long time before saying, "There's only one heartbeat, but it's reading two distinct rhythms." She printed the image anyway, said it was probably machine interference. When we got home, I taped the print out to the fridge. It showed a single outline, one fetus, but the tracing at the bottom had two separate waves that intersected, almost touching, then parting again. That night, I sat in the nursery until the room cooled and the house settled. I pressed my palm against the crib rail, right where the wood grain split. For a moment, I could feel the slow thump beneath it. Not sound, just vibration, moving exactly opposite to my own pulse. I whispered, "It's okay. You can rest." The air eased, and for the first time in months, the door stayed closed on its own. Mark asked the next morning how I slept. I told him fine, and for once it was true. When the baby came 3 weeks later, a girl, small but healthy, the delivery room lights flickered once, then stabilized. The nurses said it was a power surge. They asked if we'd picked a name. I looked at Mark, then back at the nurse, and said the first word that came to mind, Ellen. He didn't object. I used to think the strangest thing about my husband's family was how courteous they were. His mother especially, always quiet, always observing. When she passed last winter, I expected sadness, maybe ease. I did not expect to find a box in her attic with my name carved on it, even though she'd never once called me by my name, without hesitation. It happened 3 days after the wake. Mark was outside dealing with the old shed, and I was sorting through his mother's clothes in the upstairs chamber. The house felt different without her. Lighter, but not in a pleasant sense, like the dust finally had space to drift. I opened a wardrobe drawer and found a stack of envelopes tied with cord. The paper was aged, the ink blurred. On top was a small silver key taped to a note that said "Only for Emily when she's ready." My chest tightened. She'd never given me anything personal, not even on holidays. I thought maybe it was jewelry, something treasured, a gesture of acceptance she never offered when she was living. The key fit a small cedar box I'd seen earlier in the loft. I climbed up to get it. The moment I picked it up, I noticed the carving on the base. Deep, careful letters spelling out EMILY. The date beneath it was even stranger. 2005. That was long before I met Mark. I brought the box downstairs, sat on the bed, and opened it. Inside were letters, all addressed to me, all written in my husband's script, all dated between 2005 and 2013, 8 years before we ever met. At first, I thought my brain was malfunctioning. The handwriting was certain, the slanted T's, the open loops and the Y's. But the dates didn't make sense. Neither did the content. The oldest letter read, "Dear Emily, you cried in the stairwell again today. You shouldn't carry everything alone. Someday I'll help you. Someday I'll find you." The next, "You wore the red scarf today. You think no one notices when you pull at the thread on the hem. But I notice." I felt sickened. I didn't even own a red scarf until college, and I had cried in a stairwell once freshman year during exams. It was something I told no one, not even Mark. Another letter described the layout of my first apartment in Spokane. The chipped tile by the washroom, the cracked window frame, the light reflection on the kitchen floor around 3 p.m. I pressed my palm to my mouth, shaking. None of this made sense. We met in 2018. We didn't grow up in the same city. We didn't share friends. He never lived in Spokane before me. And yet, these epistles, hundreds of them, described my quirks, my rituals, even random incidents. The time I dropped groceries on the sidewalk in freezing sleet. The way I ate cereal dry when I was stressed. How I hummed under my breath while scrubbing crockery. The exact nightmare I used to have about the red corridor. Things no one could know unless they had been observing me. I heard the front door open, Mark's steps. I shoved the letters back into the box, slammed the lid closed, and hid it under the bed before he came upstairs. He walked in grinning, covered in dirt. "You all right? You look pale." I forced a chuckle, just weary. But that night, when he fell asleep, I took the box out again. There was one more thing inside. Something I hadn't noticed before. A folded sheet. thick and old with handwriting that didn't belong to Mark. It was his mother's. As anticipated, wife will be quiet, observant, stable-handed. Name Emily. Year 2018. Her nature nervous, but faithful. My entire body froze. As anticipated, foreseen. There were more lines. Begin writing exercises for connection. Practice emotional simulation. Recognize her by the apartment panes. Do not tell her until after nuptials. I felt something inside me yield. This wasn't love notes. This was an accident. This was a scheme, a family practice, a foretelling of the woman their son would wed. Me. Years before we ever met. The next letter, dated the month before our nuptials, was in his mother's same thin script. She matches perfectly. Seal the box. Give it to her when she learns to rely. My throat tightened so hard I couldn't swallow. Reliance. All this time, trust had been a trial I didn't know I was taking. I heard movement beside me. Mark had woken up. He sat up slowly. Emily, why do you have that container? I held the letter in shaking fingers. What is this? What did your mother make you do? He stared at the floor for a long moment, then whispered, Don't open anything else. Please. It's not what you imagine. His hands were trembling. My voice cracked. Then what is it? He squeezed his eyes shut. It's the reason I didn't think I merited you. The reason I almost canceled the wedding. The reason she traced every woman in our bloodline the same way. I stepped back. Every woman? My voice came out barely audible. How did your family know my name? How did they know where I resided? How did they know my habits before you even met me? He finally looked up at me, eyes vacant. Because my mother didn't foresee you, Emily. He swallowed hard. She selected you. The room went still. My pulse pounded in my ears. He kept talking, words I wasn't ready for. My family always believed a marriage endures if the man is already in love with the woman before he ever meets her. I backed away like the floor was tilting under me. You were the only one who fit her notes, the one she said I would love most. He hesitated. She showed me your picture when I was 19. My heart sank. My picture? When I was 19. I shook my head violently. That's not possible. I had no connection to your family. Mark's voice broke. You did. You were on her roster. I whispered. What roster? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I remembered the line from the letter. Begin writing exercises for connection. I remembered the dates, the accounts of my life before him, the detailed records, the carved box from 2005, my name engraved 10 years before we met. I felt myself dropping inside my own chest. The roster wasn't about foretelling. It was about choosing. And I was chosen. For a long moment after he said it, the room didn't feel like a room anymore. It felt like a passage. Narrow, stifling, no exits. My heart wasn't beating the way it should. It was stumbling, losing tempo, chosen, picked, primed for. I sat on the edge of the bed, the box between us, like a third presence neither of us wanted to touch. Start from the beginning, I managed.
Tell me how your mother knew who I was. Mark rubbed both hands over his face. He looked drained, not culpable, not frenzied, just worn in a way I'd never seen. My mom kept what she called her future wife ledgers. She started them when I was 12. They described the kind of woman she believed I'd end up with. Every attribute, nature, customs, dreads, strengths. I stared at him in disbelief. That's not foretelling, Mark. That's preoccupation. He nodded. I know. I didn't see it that way back then. She'd say things like, love grows easier when you know someone before they know you. She meant it as solace. I didn't realize how unhealthy it was. I gestured at the letters. These aren't ledgers. You wrote these about me before you met me.
His voice cracked.
She made me. She called it emotional tuition. Said if I practiced caring about someone, I'd recognize her when the time came. My stomach twisted. So you practiced on me, Emily? His eyes filled with something close to sorrow. When she first showed me your picture, I thought she lost her mind. She said she found a profile online. Someone with the right disposition, the gentleness she believed would balance mine. She chose you because of how you looked in one photograph. You were smiling at a dog. I remembered that picture. Sophomore year, My friend had posted it. I never knew anyone else had saved it, let alone used it for whatever this was. I was 19, he continued. You were 17. I didn't reach out. I didn't pursue you. I didn't even know where you resided. She gave me a few particulars, things she picked up online or guessed from the background of your photos. She told me to write to you, not to send them, just to simulate. And I did, because I didn't know how to say no to her. He ran his fingers through his hair, trembling. I hated it. But she'd cry and tell me I'd never find someone to love me if I didn't learn how to be perceptive. I didn't realize how perverse it was until after college. So, why didn't you tell me when we met? He swallowed hard. Because by then I'd fallen in love with you for real. Not the girl she portrayed you, the woman you actually were. And I was terrified that if I told you, you'd think you were a project. My breath caught because that was exactly what I thought. He kept going. When we met in person, it wasn't because of her. It wasn't planned. I saw you on the ferry. You were reading a book I loved. You dropped your coffee. I helped you pick it up. That was genuine. All of that was authentic. And for the first time, I didn't see the girl from the letters. I saw someone I didn't know. Someone I wanted to know. He looked at me like he was asking for permission to keep breathing. And I told my mother to stop. I told her never to show me those journals again. She agreed. I thought the ritual ended with her. Silence settled between us. Heavy but not fatal. I whispered, "You should have told me from the onset." He nodded without hesitation. "I know, and I'm sorry. I was ashamed of how much of my life she orchestrated. I thought if I left it behind, it would stay behind." I opened the box again, looking at the letters differently now. Not as evidence of pursuit, but as evidence of a boy manipulated into believing love was a skill to practice, not something that happens to you. Still, it stung. I held up the last note, the one his mother wrote. "Give it to her when she learns to rely." What does that even mean? I asked. Mark exhaled. It means she assumed I'd have to earn your love by pretending to be someone flawless, someone who could never disappoint you. That's how she existed. Keeping secrets, performing love. She passed that on to me. Something in me eased. Not pardon, not yet, but comprehension. "I'm not your mother," I said quietly. "I don't want a perfect spouse. I want a genuine one." His lips trembled. "Then let me start by being sincere." He stood, walked to his chest of drawers, opened the bottom compartment, and pulled out a leather-bound ledger. He placed it in my hands. "This is the one my mother made me write before I met you. I've never reread it. You can. Every page, if you want to know who I was before I chose to be someone better." I opened the first page. His handwriting was younger, untidier. The first line read, "I hope someday I meet someone who makes all of this unnecessary." I closed the journal gently. I didn't need to read more. I sat beside him on the bed. We didn't say anything for a long time. The box was still between us, but the influence it had felt smaller, like a relic from a life neither of us wanted anymore. Finally, I took his hand. "We're burning it," I said. "All of it tonight." His shoulders relaxed like I just handed him air. "Yeah," he whispered. "I'd like that." We went to the backyard, lit the fire pit, dropped in the letters, the notes, the old predictions. They curled and blackened, ink turning into smoke, rising into a night that finally felt pure. When the box was empty, I tossed it in two. Mark wrapped an arm around me as it caught flame. No secrets left, no practices, no prospects, just us. Two people who finally knew the whole story. As the last ember died, I realized something I hadn't felt in hours. Relief. A closed conclusion. A clean one. The first one his family had ever allowed, and the only one we chose together. I first realized something was amiss with my husband's family the night we told them I was expecting. We were sitting at his parents' long mahogany dining surface, candles shimmering, everyone still wearing the same cautious expressions from dessert. When I said we were having a baby, his mother gasped, his sister embraced me, and his father simply folded his napkin and stated, "Then tomorrow we begin the traits inventory." He said it with the same tone someone might use to say, "We'll schedule the oil change." I laughed anxiously, assuming it was some weird family just I wasn't in on, but my husband, Sam, squeezed my knee under the table hard enough that I flinching. In the car afterward, I asked what the traits inventory meant. He told me it was old-fashioned nonsense and changed the subject so quickly I knew not to press him. I didn't think about it again until the ultrasound appointment 2 weeks later. The technician pointed at the screen and declared, delighted, "Look, your little one is already favoring her left limb. That's premature." I laughed and made some comment about left-handed artists. Sam didn't laugh. He just stared at the monitor with an expression that wasn't joy or surprise, but something closer to terror. On the drive home, he kept tapping his fingers against the pane. Right hand tapping, left hand curled tight in his lap like it didn't belong to him. Out of nowhere, he said, "My dad foretold I'd be left-handed, too." His voice sounded flat, like he was reciting a datum instead of remembering it. When I asked if the prediction was accurate, he took a long time to respond. Finally, he said it was until they modified it. He didn't explain what modified meant, and I didn't push him, but something in my stomach tightened. 2 days later, an envelope arrived in our mailbox addressed to Sam, but sealed with his father's distinctive rigid handwriting. Sam opened it, skimmed the first page, and instantly tore the whole thing in half. Shreds of paper descended to the floor like plumes. He didn't shout. He didn't clarify. He just said, "Don't read any of this." Scooped up the pieces and threw them away. That night, he barely spoke to me at all. The next afternoon, when Sam was at work, a second envelope arrived. This one was addressed to me. My name, Tessa, written in formal block capitals. Inside were 12 typed pages titled Predicted Traits of the Child 2025 Iteration. I knew immediately this wasn't standard. The predictions weren't generic like strong-willed or creative. They were disturbingly precise. Left-hand prominence by age 2. Early vocal development. Unease with tall ceilings. Rhythmic imitation. Apprehension when observed during tasks. Sensitivity to structured reproach. Strong attachment tendencies. Resistance to independent choice-making. My hands started to shake as I read. It felt less like a prediction list and more like directives. Instructions for building a persona someone had already decided our child should possess. Even worse, some of the traits felt familiar in a way that made the back of my neck sting. They sounded like things Sam struggled with, things he never talked about. That night, I confronted him. He told me the truth in fragments. The way you confess while pulling barbs out one at a time. His family had been generating these trait inventories for nearly a century. Every child in the lineage was foretold. And if those predictions didn't come true, they were directed. Directed meant pressured, incentivized, punished, shaped like clay until they fit the pattern written for them before they were even born. When I asked what they did to him, he stared down at his hands as if they didn't belong to him. "They didn't want me to be left-handed," he said quietly. "Left-handed wasn't on the list for me. Right-handed was, so they made me right-handed." When I asked what he meant by made, he whispered, "They tied my left hand behind my back every day before school for months, maybe years. I honestly don't remember how long. I only remember the fastenings. I felt ill. My husband, gentle, patient, soft-spoken Sam, had been formed into someone suitable, someone anticipated, someone modified. And now his family was planning it again. This time for our child. I told him we would never let that occur. He promised we wouldn't. He said he hated the lists, hated the duress, hated the silence. But later that night when he fell asleep, I noticed his left hand twitching in tiny involuntary motions, like it was remembering something he wanted to erase. I couldn't sleep. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, I walked into the guest room where his parents had stored boxes of old family possessions. I opened the cabinet, crouched down, and pulled out a dusty wooden crate labeled Archive. Inside were journals, dozens of them, each labeled with a year and a name that matched generations of his family, his grandmother, his father, Sam himself. Every journal filled with attributes, amendments, benchmarks, emotional schematics, and comments about whether each prediction had been achieved or not. And then I found it. A brand new journal, unlabeled, except for one thing. A small handwritten tag tucked inside the cover. 2025 subject. My heart sank. I opened it. The first page wasn't blank. It had a single line written in Sam's script fresh enough that the ink hadn't fully absorbed into the paper. It said, "Left hand dominant. Correct promptly." My breath went cold. My chest hollowed. Sam had already initiated the sequence. Maybe not deliberately, maybe out of fear, maybe out of instinct, but he had begun the ritual nonetheless. I was still staring down at the words when I heard footsteps behind me. Sam stood in the doorway, pale and shaking, looking at me like he'd been caught doing something shameful and helpless at the same time. "Tessa," he whispered, "please don't look at that." I held the journal against my chest. My voice felt thin and razor-sharp. "Why did you write this? You said you didn't want to do this. You said you hated what they did to you." He stepped into the room slowly, almost afraid of himself. "I didn't mean it the way it appears. I swear I was afraid. I didn't want her to suffer what I did." Writing it down felt like controlling the dread. I shook my head. "Sam, you're replicating it. Even if you don't mean to, you're repeating exactly what they taught you." He sank onto the edge of the bed, covering his face with both hands. I know, Tess. I'm trying to unlearn it. I've been trying my whole life. It lives in me. I don't know how to stop something that was built into me before I knew my own designation." I sat beside him, trembling but firm. "Then we stop it together. We protect her together." He nodded, tears slipping through his fingers. "I want that. I do. I want to disrupt it."
I just don't know how. I closed the journal and flipped to the inside cover, meaning to tear out the page he wrote. But before I could, something else caught my eye. Faint script. Older. Written in a fountain pen handwriting. It wasn't Sam's. It wasn't his father's. It was someone much older. "The child who breaks the pattern must be formed first." The blood drained from my face, because that meant someone generations ago had already predicted this moment, had written directives for controlling the child who tried to end the custom, which meant they knew long before Sam was even born that one day someone would try to break the sequence. And they had a plan for that child too. For a long moment I couldn't move. The words on the inside cover, "The child who breaks the pattern must be formed first," didn't feel like a warning from the past. They felt like instructions, a scheme, a menace handed down through time, waiting patiently for the next generation to comply. I felt Sam watching me with a kind of terrified helplessness, his hands clasped as if he were trying to keep them from shaking. "Tessa," he whispered, "whatever you're speculating, I'm not like them." But the truth was, he didn't need to be like them. Their expectations had carved channels into him long before he ever became an adult. Even now, his entire bearing was that of someone awaiting amendment. Shoulders drawn in, gaze downcast, breath held tight in his chest. I knew then that this wasn't just trauma. It was a family system engineered to repeat itself, unless someone forcibly broke it. I closed the journal slowly. "We're done with this," I said. "All of it." He nodded quickly, gratefully, but the relief didn't stay long. His expression shifted as we heard tires crunching on gravel outside the window. Headlights swept across the surface. My chest went rigid. Sam stood, walked to the pane, looked out, and shut the curtains instantly. "It's my father," he said. "He's premature." I felt ice crawl up my spine. Early for what? Sam swallowed hard. Every time a child in the family reaches the second trimester, he comes to evaluate the advancement. It's part of the custom. He thinks he's assisting. I stepped back intuitively, tightening my grip on the journal. He can't come in here and tell us how to raise our child. That's exactly what he's coming to do, Sam said quietly. And he's not going to take no for an answer. Before I could respond, the front door opened without knocking. His father stepped inside like he possessed the dwelling, not even glancing around. He was a tall man with a posture so unyielding it seemed painful, like his spine had been trained not to flex. His eyes moved with the precision of a timer, rapid, gauging, unrelenting. He saw the open crate of old journals behind me. His jaw clenched. "You shouldn't have gone through those," he said. "The past is for consultation, not for verdict." I stepped in front of Sam. "Your system ends here." He raised one eyebrow. amused in a way that made my skin creep. You think this is my system? I inherited it the same as him. This is how our family ensures strong offspring, focused offspring, children who don't crumble under duress. I felt my stomach turn. You fractured your son, I said, my voice shaking with restrained anger. You tied his hand behind his back because a piece of paper told you to. He looked genuinely perplexed. It wasn't punishment. It was modification. He was meant to be right-handed. Predictions aren't speculations. They're frameworks. Without order, children become frail. Sam stepped forward, voice raw. I wasn't frail. I was terrified. For the first time, his father looked at him. Not as an adult, not as a man, but the way someone examines a disappointing design. You turned out adequate, he said. You married the right woman, and now we prepare your child the right way. He reached for the blank journal in my hand. I pulled it away. His expression sharpened as though I had broken a rule I didn't know existed. Tessa, he said calmly, give it to me. You're clouded by feeling. You're new to this lineage. You haven't earned the right to make structural decisions yet. That word structural hit me like a blow. His entire perspective was architecture. Children were edifices. Traits were barriers. Discipline was the base. There was no room for compassion. No, I said. This journal ends here. I walked to the hearth, flipped open the metal guard, and tossed the book inside. Sam's father lunged, but Sam caught his arm, finally standing between us for the first time in his life. We all watched the edges of the journal curl and darken as the flames took hold. You're making a blunder, his father hissed. But patterns don't break just because you want them to. They break only when the child fails. I stepped forward, placing my hand protectively over my abdomen. Then she will grow into herself, not into your parchment. He stared at me with an expression that flickered. Rage, confusion, fear, before resolving into something hollow and small. For the first time, I saw the reality. This man wasn't dominant. He was trained, conditioned, shaped as tightly as he had shaped Sam. He wasn't a villain. He was a result. He left without another word. The door closed behind him with a sound that didn't echo authority anymore, only defeat. When the house finally settled into quiet, Sam sat down beside me on the sofa. He rested his forehead against my shoulder, exhausted in body and soul. I'm afraid, he said softly. I don't know how to be a father without doing what they did. You don't have to know yet, I said, running my hand through his hair. You just have to want something distinct. That's where it begins. We sat there for a long time, letting the warmth of the fire replace the chill his father left behind. Eventually, Sam whispered something that made my chest ache with both sadness and hope. I want her to choose her own limb, her own apprehensions, her own strengths. I want her to be everything they said wasn't permitted. I kissed the side of his head. Then that's the child we'll nurture. Weeks later at our next scan, the technician smiled and said, Look at her. Still favoring that left limb. This time, Sam smiled too. Not with fear, not with dread, with pride. And for the first time since that cursed journal entered our lives, I felt something settle inside me. Something stable, comforting, unwavering. The pattern was disrupted entirely, and our child would never know that anything else had ever been planned for her. I discovered the tapes by chance, and sometimes I wish I'd never opened that attic hatch at all. My mother always told me the attic was just storage, and she kept the key in the junk drawer, hidden under old batteries and rubber bands. I only went looking for it because she sprained her ankle and asked me to bring down the Christmas luminaries. It was supposed to be a 2-minute chore. I climbed the narrow wooden steps, bracing my hand on the wall because the boards flexed under my mass. I'd been in the attic once as a child, but it was a hazy recollection, just boxes, dust, and insulation. But this time felt different. The air was too motionless, like the room had been waiting for me. The boxes were arranged in careful lines, almost like someone had mapped out the space years ago and never altered it. I found the container with the holiday lights easily enough, but as I turned to depart, something caught my gaze. A smaller box tucked behind a trunk, not labeled, not dusty, like it had been relocated recently. Curiosity pulled me toward it, even though a pressure in my chest told me not to touch it. Inside were 8 VHS tapes, each one labeled in my mother's handwriting, each one labeled with a year, and each one labeled with my designation. At first, I just felt a weird nostalgia. Old home videos, nothing special. I brought them downstairs, assuming Mom would smile and tell me stories about when I was young. Instead, when she saw the tapes in my hands, her whole face transformed. The color drained out. She stood up too fast, almost losing her balance, and demanded, "Where'd you find those?" Her voice wasn't furious. It was petrified. I told her they were just in a box. She reached for them instantly. I pulled them back without deliberation. That was the moment I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not irritation, not awkwardness, terror, the kind that comes from being trapped. That night, after she went to bed early with the excuse of resting her ankle, I took the tapes to my room. I didn't own a VCR, but our neighbor, Mr. Harold, did. I borrowed it under the excuse of wanting to digitize old memories. He didn't ask questions. Music, everyone in our neighborhood trusted me. I was the ideal kid, the reliable one, the civil one, the kind everyone assumes came from a stable, loving family. I guess that's the funniest part looking back. The first tape was labeled Nolan, age 3. I pushed it into the VCR, expecting to see myself laughing, maybe playing with blocks, maybe blowing music out birthday candles. Instead, the video opened on a little boy sitting cross-legged on my parents' living room rug. Same carpet we still had, same lamp in the corner, same drapes. But the boy wasn't me. He had the same bowl haircut my mom always gave me, the same striped pajamas I remembered wearing in old photos, the same tired, quiet stance. But the face was distinct. Not similar, not close, completely different. A different child, a stranger. But everything around him, the house, the furnishings, the toys, was identical to my childhood. I sat forward instinctively, like I needed to get closer to something perilous before I could respond. The video had no sound for the first few seconds. Then my mother's voice came from behind the camera. Gentle, motivating. "Sit up erect, sweetheart." Just like before, the boy adjusted his posture the way a kid does when they've been corrected too many times. My stomach twisted. I fast-forwarded. The boy ate cereal at the table, played with blocks, scribbled something in a coloring book. All quiet, all compliant, all known. And every so often, my mother would repeat the same phrase. "Good. Just like that. That's how Nolan does it." I paused the tape. My body felt cold. I had no memory of any of this, because it wasn't me. Yet, my mother's voice spoke as if the child was me, as if she was drilling, as if she was preparing him. The next tape was labeled Nolan, age 4. Again, a child who wasn't me. Same house, same patterns, same motivation, same amendments, same clothes I later wore in preschool images. By the 5th tape, my hands were shaking so badly I had to steady the VCR with my knee. This tape was labeled Nolan, age 6. I pushed play. The boy sat at the kitchen table again, drawing shapes with crayons. My mother's hand entered the frame, adjusting his hold. "No, sweetie. Nolan doesn't hold it like that." He tried again and again. His small shoulders tightened each time he failed. I watched the whole thing because I couldn't look away. My mother had trained this child to be me. Or more precisely, she had trained him to ready the role I was meant to occupy, WY Tape 7. I was sweating and nauseous. This one was labeled with my birth year, the year I actually arrived. I clicked play and saw an empty nursery. My nursery set up flawlessly. The camera scanned slowly across the room as if documenting a final stage before an assessment. Then my mother's voice whispered, "This time it will succeed." My breath caught. This time, the boy from the earlier tapes must have been the first attempt, and I was the second. My hands felt numb as I reached for the final tape, the one that looked newer than the rest, labeled simply Nolan, no age. I hesitated before putting it in. My heartbeat was hammering so loudly I worried the old VCR would pick it up. When the tape started, the video showed my bedroom, my current bedroom. The camera wasn't zoomed out. It was zoomed in on me, asleep. My mother's breathing filled the speaker. Slow, heavy, not afraid, not culpable, just observing. Her voice whispered, almost gentle, "Look how well you turned out." Then she added something even softer. Thank you for being simpler than the first one. I stopped the tape immediately, my fingers slipping on the eject control. I sat there trembling, unable to process anything. My mother wasn't deranged. She wasn't delusional. She was focused, unwavering, methodical, and she had done this before. I didn't want to believe it. Didn't want to believe, but belief didn't matter. The tapes were authentic. When I stepped into the hallway, she was standing at the end of it, awake, silent, her face serene in the dim illumination. She said one sentence that froze me completely. I told you never to go in the attic, Nolan. We don't talk about the first child. My mouth went arid. Who was he? She tilted her head almost sympathetically. You don't need to worry about that, sweetheart. You lasted longer. My stomach plunged. What does that imply? She smiled faintly. Failed duplicates don't get to grow up. My blood turned to ice. And that's when I realized something else. She wasn't holding anything, but her sleeves were rolled up like she'd been working or preparing or waiting for me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My mother stood there with that faint practice smile. The same smile I'd seen hundreds of times growing up. The same smile the boy in the tapes never got correct, no matter how many times she corrected him. I stepped back toward my room instinctively, like I could barricade myself inside, but she slowly shook her head. There's no need to be scared, she said gently. You're still my Nolan. The softness in her voice made everything worse. It wasn't caring. It was rehearsed, memorized. A script she'd spoken so many times to the child before me that it no longer meant anything real. Every word carried the weight of rote, not devotion. I swallowed hard. What happened to him? My voice cracked. She sighed, almost annoyed that I insisted on digging where she didn't want me to. He couldn't meet the requirements, she said factually. He struggled too much. He didn't comply. I tried so hard with him. She pressed her fingertips to her temple, like remembering him gave her a headache. But he wasn't ready to become Nolan, so I had to reboot. I felt the blood leave my face again, just like it had in the attic. Reboot. She gave a tiny, almost apologetic shrug. Some children don't adapt. It's unfortunate, but it occurs. What matters is that you did. You were everything the first one couldn't be. I took another step back. My throat felt constricted, my pulse racing so fast I worried she could hear it. I'm not him, I whispered. I'm not supposed to be him. Her expression didn't change. Oh, sweetheart, she said softly. You're supposed to be exactly him. That's the objective. My legs felt feeble. She moved closer, her hands out like she was trying to calm a frightened creature. Don't do this to yourself, she murmured. Don't ruin what we constructed. I worked so hard to make you right, to correct the faults, to help you conform. I shook my head. You don't get to decide who I am. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing with a kind of disappointed pity. But I already did. The hallway felt too cramped. I backed into my room and closed the door, leaning all my weight against it while my hand shook so violently I could barely turn the bolt. I heard her sigh on the other side, soft, patient, tired, the same sigh she gave the boy in the tape when he struggled to draw correctly. Nolan, she said through the wood, don't make this complex. My mind raced. I grabbed my phone, my wallet, anything I could reach. The window was my only egress. My room was on the first level. I could make it. I slid it open, pushed the screen out, and climbed through into the cold night air. My feet hit the grass firmly, my breath condensed. I heard the front door open behind me. TSK, she said, her voice drifting across the lawn. There you go again, fleeing. That wasn't on your dossier. I sprinted across the lawn and didn't look back. I didn't take my car. I didn't take the main thoroughfare. I cut through neighbors' gardens, jumped barriers, scraped my palms on rough wood until they bled. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of the woods where the street lights thinned. Only then did I look behind me. I didn't see her. I didn't hear her. But that didn't matter because I knew what she was capable of silently. I walked all night, staying off the roads. At dawn, I made it to a bus station in the next town over. I bought a ticket with trembling hands and sat in the rear, hood up, constantly checking the passageway. Every passenger felt like a danger. Every cough or shift in a seat made me flinch. I didn't even know where the bus was going. I just needed distance. But distance doesn't break a pattern. It just delays it. 3 days passed before I stopped at a cheap motel off a rural roadway. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the boy in the tape sitting on that rug, waiting to be amended, waiting to become someone else, waiting to be removed the moment he failed. On the 4th day, I finally gathered the resolve to call home from a pay phone. I told myself I would keep the call brief, just long enough to understand what I already dreaded. The phone rang twice before she answered. Her voice was calm, too calm, like I wasn't missing, like I hadn't fled, like she expected this communication. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "thank you for calling. I've been so concerned." There was no fury, no terror, just patient assurance. The same tone she used on the tapes when instructing the boy to sit still. I swallowed hard. "Don't look for me." She let out a small exhale, almost a chuckle. "Oh, honey, I don't need to look for you." My grip tightened on the device. "What does that signify?" "It means," she said in that maddeningly soft voice, "I accepted that you weren't prepared. It occurs. Not every version works, but it's acceptable." The pause that followed made my entire body go numb. I've already started again. My heart stopped. "What?" "A new boy," she said gently. "You'll like him. He's so eager to please. So quiet. I think this one will be ideal. He already responds to your designation." My stomach twisted. "My designation?" "Oh yes," she said, sounding proud. "I showed him your childhood images. He looks just like you did at his age. He's practicing your handwriting now. It's quite good, actually. Better than yours was." I felt myself swaying, dizziness creeping into my cranium. "Where did you get him?" She laughed softly. "You don't need to worry about that. He's secure. He's indoors. And he's doing everything the first two couldn't." My throat constricted. "First two?" "Oh, Nolan," she whispered. "You weren't the second. You were the third. The others, they just couldn't get it right. But this one feels hopeful." My knees buckled. I had to brace myself against the pay phone to keep from collapsing. She continued in a warm, motherly voice. "But don't feel unhappy. You lasted longer than the rest. You should be proud of that." I opened my mouth to speak, but she kept going, her tone shifting into something colder. "And please don't come back. You'll confuse him. He needs stability. He needs a clean setting. He needs a space to grow into you and to me." She was growing a new me, a better me, a modified me. My breath turned shallow, almost absent. "Mom, please don't hurt him." "Hurt him?" she repeated, genuinely puzzled. "Oh no, sweetheart. I won't hurt him. Not if he becomes you the right way." A click. She hung up. The dial tone buzzed in my ear like a flatline. I stared at the phone, unable to move, unable to think, unable to breathe. My entire existence, my memories, my identity, my place in the world wasn't mine. I had been formed, refined, sculpted into a role that didn't belong to me. And now I wasn't even the latest version anymore. Somewhere in my dwelling, another boy was sitting on my rug, wearing my attire, practicing my script, calling her mother. A boy who didn't know what happened to the ones who came before. A boy who didn't know he was being prepared for cancellation the moment he failed. I walked away from the pay phone on legs that didn't feel like mine. And for the first time in my existence, I understood the reality. You can run from a place. You can run from a person. But you can't run from being a duplicate. Not when the original never existed. Not when the assignment is bigger than you. Not when the pattern keeps going without you. Because in that moment, I finally understood what she meant. Failed duplicates don't get to grow up. And for the first time in my existence, I wasn't Nolan anymore. I was just the one she stopped selecting. I didn't know my family had a prohibited room until my father's last night breathing. He was fading rapidly. Lung malignancy. The kind that doesn't care how many people you cherish or how many pledges you haven't kept yet. The whole family gathered into his sleeping chamber. My mother, my Aunt Claudia, my Uncle Ray, my grandmother hunched in her mobility chair. They spoke in low tones, as if loud words might shatter his remaining respiration. I sat closest to him, my hand wrapped around his wrist, because it was the only part of him that wasn't in agony to contact. When he opened his gaze, he looked at me. Not them. His voice was frail, breaking, but focused. Carter, he murmured, do not unseal the chamber at the end of the passage. Pledge me. At first, I thought he meant the cellar or the shed. But then I saw everyone harden. Every one of them. At the same exact moment, my mother's eyes flicked to the corridor. My grandmother's grip tightened on her quilt. My uncle's jaw clenched. It wasn't puzzlement in their expressions. It was terror. A sudden unison fear I'd never seen in adults before. Father, I whispered, leaning near. What chamber? He didn't blink. The door with the deadbolt, the one you've never seen unlocked. Do not peer inside. No matter what you perceive. No matter what happens after I'm gone. I felt my chest constrict. Why? His mouth quivered, but his eyes stayed locked on mine. Because you can't aid him, he said. Not now and not ever. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to clarify, but she didn't. She didn't look at me at all. She stared at the ground. He died a few hours later, and the moment he did, my family refused to leave the residence. They stayed for days, sleeping on settees, pacing the halls at night, whispering behind closed portals. It didn't feel like daybreak. It felt like oversight. It felt like they were monitoring me. On the third evening, I heard it for the first time. A soft rhythmic pounding coming from the end of the passage. I sat up in bed, heart throbbing. It wasn't plumbing. It wasn't the house settling. It was too constant, too regulated. Almost like someone tapping lightly, slow, patient taps, waiting for a reply. My mother appeared in my doorway immediately, as if she'd been standing outside it all night. Her voice was razor thin. Don't rise, she murmured. I swallowed hard. What is that? She shook her head, eyes wide, as if answering might invite something into the space. Go back to rest. I didn't rest, and I didn't forget the sound. The next daybreak, they locked the door at the end of the hall again. 3 deadbolts, each one installed at a different elevation. I'd never questioned those locks before. They'd just been part of the residence, like peeling covering or mismatched surfaces. But now they felt intentional, tactical, a barrier, not a portal. I watched my uncle slide a metal fixture across the handle. He paused when he saw me observing. This isn't your affair, Carter, he said quietly. It sounds like someone's in there, I whispered. My Aunt Claudia stepped between us, blocking my view of the portal. No one is in there. It's just old plumbing. Don't go near it. Old plumbing don't make steps. That night, the tapping started again. Louder. Music more frantic. 3 taps, a pause. 3 taps again. The same sequence, over and over. It wasn't random. It was a signal. And that was when something inside me fractured. I wasn't a child. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't going to pretend I didn't hear a human rhythm echoing through the walls of my own residence. My father had been afraid, petrified, but he'd also been perishing, trapped in memories and regrets I didn't comprehend. He had secrets. Our whole family did. Secrets that had decayed the house into something unfamiliar. I waited until everyone was asleep. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I left my chamber, walking slowly down the passage. The house felt heavier than it ever had, like the air had densified around the truth. Moonlight from the side window cast a cold line across the carpet as I approached the portal. I pressed my ear against it. Silence, no tapping, no footsteps, just breathing, soft, shallow, uneven. Someone was inside that chamber. My fingers shook as I touched the cold deadbolt. I hesitated just for a moment, hearing my father's voice again. His last plea. Don't open the chamber. But the breathing on the other side was genuine. Human. Desperate. I slid the first deadbolt open. The metal clattered too loudly. I froze, expecting the breathing to accelerate, but it didn't. It stayed steady as if whoever was inside was accustomed to the sound. My heart pounded against my ribs. Second deadbolt. Third. The handle felt warm in my palm from my own anxiety. I turned it. The door opened with a long, low groan. The kind of sound that isn't mechanical. It feels vital, like the house itself was cautioning me. And there, in the dim shadows of the chamber, was a form. Small, slender, sitting on a mattress pushed against the partition. His knees drawn up, his arms wrapped around them, his head turned slightly, as if the door opening wasn't a shock, just a new variable in a life of limited uniformity. His eyes were vast in the gloom, and they locked onto mine the instant the air rushed in. He choked. Not a cry, not a wail, a choke. Music sharp and violent like air was toxin, and he just inhaled it for the first time in years. His body jerked involuntarily. His hands flew to his throat. He tried to stand but collapsed onto the mattress, shaking uncontrollably. His breaths turned ragged, then frantic, then moist, like his lungs were submerging on air they weren't meant to receive. I stepped forward aghast. Hey, it's fine. But it wasn't. He convulsed once, twice, then fell completely motionless. The only sound in the room was my own respiration, broken, panicked, disbelieving. Then another sound, a gasp behind me. I turned. My entire family stood in the doorway. My mother, my aunt, my uncle, my grandmother. Every one of them awake, observing, faces twisted with horror. My mother's voice was barely a whisper. What did you do? And that was the moment I realized the reality that crushed the air from my lungs. I didn't release him. I ended him. The only environment that kept him alive was the one I demolished the moment I opened the portal. And every pair of eyes staring at me. Every member of my family saw only one thing. The villain, the slayer, the one who disobeyed, the one who terminated him. My legs gave out beneath me as my mother shrieked. High, broken, bestial. And I knew there was no remedy for what I'd done. There was no clemency. There was no fleeing. Only penalty. Only censure. Only me. The room filled with wailing. Not mine. My mother's. A raw. Music. Jagged sound sliced through the walls as she shoved past me and collapsed beside the boy. She cupped his face in her shaking hands, whispering his name over and over, begging him to wake up, begging him to breathe, begging him not to leave her. My Aunt Claudia knelt on the other side, sobbing into her palms. My Uncle Ray grabbed my shoulder, so hard I felt his nails dig through my shirt. What did you do? He hissed in my ear. His breath was hot, furious, trembling. What did you do? I tried to speak. My mouth parted, but nothing came out. I couldn't form a phrase, couldn't form a notion. My brain was still stuck in the moment the boy gasped when the door opened. The way his body rejected the air, the illumination, the temperature, the world outside, the one they'd created for him. I didn't know. I stuttered finally. I didn't know he was unwell. My grandmother wheeled forward, her voice sharp as a lash. We told you. She shrieked. Your father told you. All his life. He told you. No, I whispered, backing up. He didn't. He said to not open it, but he didn't say why. Because he was trying to protect us. My mother sobbed, rocking the boy's lifeless form. Protect him. Protect you. The words hit me like a mallet. Protect me from what? The boy's body jerked in her arms once more, like a final spasm, and then went slack. My mother's scream collapsed into a low, guttural lament that didn't sound human. I crawled backward until my back hit the hallway partition. He was living in there. I choked out. Why didn't anyone tell me? My uncle rounded on me with wild, wet eyes. Because you were never supposed to open that portal. You were never supposed to go near him. Why? I shouted. Why would you keep a child like that in a chamber? Why would you lock him away? Why? Why didn't you treat him? Why didn't you take him to a clinic? Why didn't you? My aunt whipped toward me, her face contorted. He couldn't survive externally. She shrieked. We attempted. When he was delivered, he spent the first 8 weeks in the NICU. Every time he breathed normal air, he failed. Every time he got touched by anything outside that chamber, he almost perished. We built that space for him. We kept him alive for years. My stomach dropped. You built it for him? Yes, she spat. We sanitized it every daybreak. We governed the dampness. We governed the light. We stayed awake in shifts to feed him, to keep him placid, to keep him breathing. My mother clutched the boy's frail arm to her chest, whispering through tears. He wasn't a secret. He was our duty, our burden, our affection. We did everything to keep him alive. Everything. Her eyes shot up and locked onto mine with an expression so cold I felt it slice through me. And you ended him. The hallway spun. No, I whispered. No, I didn't know. You opened the portal, my grandmother snapped. You let the air in. You let the contaminants in. You let everything in. My uncle's voice cracked with rage. One instant. One moment is all it required. I'm sorry, I sobbed, sliding down the wall. I didn't know he was in there. I didn't know he was living. My mother's face twisted into something I'd never seen. You didn't inquire. You didn't heed. You didn't rely on your father. You just did what you desired. I tried to move toward her, but she retreated, clutching the boy's body tighter. Don't you touch him, she spat. Don't you come near him. Don't you come near any of us. My chest caved inward. Mother, please. You opened the portal, she whispered. You opened the portal. Her voice shook, dropping to a tremor. Your father begged you not to. He begged you in his last respiration. He didn't explain. He didn't have to. She shrieked. It wasn't a conundrum, Carter. It was a regulation. And now he's deceased. Our boy is deceased because of you. The entire family turned toward me then. 8 eyes burning with grief and fury. 8 eyes filled with reproach. 8 eyes that would never forgive me. Never see me the same. Never let me breathe without reminding me of this instant. You're a slayer, my uncle said softly. No, I choked. No, please. Please, I didn't know. My grandmother pointed a trembling finger at me. Get out, she whispered. Out. My aunt shoved me backward, her face blotchy with tears. Don't ever come back, she snarled. Don't ever show your face again. My mother didn't speak. She stared at me the way someone stares at a stranger who walked into their house, wearing their attire. She looked at me like I wasn't her son, like I never had been. Her lips parted slowly. Go, she whispered, before I make you. I stumbled backward, tripping over my feet as I scrambled down the passage. I ran out the front door into the cold night, choking on sobs, my chest collapsing around each breath. I made it to the driveway before collapsing onto my knees, my palms scraping open on the surface. Behind me, the door slammed with finality that felt like a lifetime closing shut. They didn't call the authorities. They didn't ask where I was going. They didn't care. They didn't want a confession. They already had one. I opened the portal. I let the air in. I terminated his existence. And the worst part, they weren't incorrect. The reality hit me so violently. I thought I'd vomit. He died because I rescued him. He died because I cared. He died because I wanted to assist. And now he died because of me. I drove away that night with no terminus, no residence, no identity. Every breath felt like a liability I shouldn't have. Every mile felt like a sanction that would never end. Every reflection in the window looked like a villain I didn't recognize. Because in everyone's eyes, eventually in my own, I wasn't Carter anymore. I was the slayer who opened the portal. I was the one who killed the boy kept alive by affection and terror and impossible regulations. I was the one who broke the only thing my family had ever agreed on. The one thing I can never outpace. The door that should have stayed closed. And the life that expired the moment I opened it.